Hey everyone, welcome to the very first episode of our new series, Reddit Rewinds. I'm your host, and today we're diving into some of the most intriguing, creepy, and sometimes downright bizarre stories that Reddit has to offer. From heartwarming tales and life-changing moments to wild adventures and unexpected twists, we've got it all lined up for you. Before we dive into today's incredible Reddit story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss out on the amazing tales we have in store for you. Let's get started. From my first day at the scrapyard, I had formed a friendship with Crenshaw. Perhaps it was because he found in me a kindred spirit. He had known the horrors of war, and I had my own terrors to bear. It was obvious that he had once been a muscular man, but time and circumstance had softened his physique and left his posture bent. His nose showed signs of having been broken more than once, and the skin of his clean-shaven head revealed a deep surgical scar that must have been decades old. While our working days left us too tired to do more than go home and rest, Crenshaw and I frequently spent our Friday nights and take-home pay in the town's lone tavern. We would talk about one thing or another. Sometimes it was to laugh over some misadventure in the scrapyard. Other times, it was to mourn the death of one of the stray dogs that had made its home there. We rarely touched on our personal lives and never discussed our pasts. One day during work, Crenshaw approached me to ask for my help. He asked to see me when our shifts ended. When my day ended, I stopped by the trailer park to change into a fresh shirt and speak to Muriel, but she was busy with a client. So I shrugged and began the long walk to the northern side of town. Crenshaw lived on the third floor of an old hotel that had been converted into low-rent dwellings. I found his apartment easily. The third floor, the first door on the left. When I knocked, he answered immediately. The apartment's windows were closed, and the chemical aroma of paint that filled the room was dizzying. My friend was wearing his ordinary street clothes, and it was evident from the sight of them that he had been working for some time, but he had been doing so with far more speed than care. I stepped inside and saw a chaos of red, black and green spread across the wall. Still, beneath those streaks of pigment, I could see garish wallpaper with a stylized jungle pattern. I asked him the meaning of this, he explained, his eyes wild and frightened. That damn wallpaper, I can't take it anymore. What's wrong with the wallpaper? It's in the trees, he said. You can see them sometimes. They think they're just out of sight, but I can tell. I could always tell. That's why they put me out on point. Rather than question any further, I started helping him cover the walls, coats of one colour after another, until the wallpaper was completely obscured. When we finished, it was past 1 a.m. With nothing better to do, we sat on the floor and shared some beers. I asked, "How long has the wallpaper bothered you?" "Ever since I moved here. But I can't afford anything like the boarding house you live in. My medicines cost too much." He looked around at the garishly coloured walls. "My squad used to go over the border into Cambodia. We weren't supposed to, but those were our orders. We were fighting kids. We were kids too, but they were younger than us, 12 years old, and ready to kill." There was nothing I could do but nod with understanding and help myself to another drink. We did things in the jungle, sometimes to survive and sometimes just because we could. He stood, grabbed a drying brush, and began dabbing at the bits of wallpaper visible near the edge of the floor. "The things I did. Why don't you just tear the wallpaper down?" I said. The look he gave me was one of horror. "No, no, no!" With that, I steered our conversation to pleasant and mundane matters. For instance, there was a new waitress at the diner who had just dropped out of high school and the new junkyard manager who happened to be the owner's son. Both of them were equally inept at their positions. From there, we moved on to world events, local crimes, and corruption, large and small. After that, we talked about hopes for the future. I talked about my plans to finish my degree, and he spoke about wanting to buy a van to make his way to California and see his long-lost son. Then we were silent, both of us aware that neither of those dreams could ever come true. Neither of us had the means or courage to make even the smallest of our dreams come true. In the long, despairing silence, we finished the last of the beer. It was 4 a.m. when I bid Crenshaw farewell and boozily made my way home. The town was utterly silent that night, the only sound coming from my uneven footsteps on the cracked sidewalk. My thoughts were consumed with my friend's story and the desperation that seemed to permeate every aspect of his life. Everyone I had met in this town had similar stories to tell. Was it true for everyone else? How many were quietly suffering and struggling to survive? By the time I reached my apartment, exhaustion had set in. I considered knocking on Muriel's door to see if she wanted some company, but in the end, I went to my own trailer and fumbled with the keys until I could let myself inside. As soon as I closed the door behind me, I collapsed onto my lumpy bed and immediately fell asleep. When I woke up 3 hours later, it was already past noon. My head throbbed from too much alcohol and not enough rest. Groaning, I dragged myself out of bed and shuffled into the bathroom to splash water on my face. For a moment, I felt like I was going to feel better, only to throw up in the sink without warning. After taking some aspirin to ease my headache, I went to work. Much to the manager's annoyance, Crenshaw never showed up. I assumed he felt just as bad as I did, but after his second day of not showing up, I was ordered to go to his home to tell him he had been fired. I walked directly to his apartment at the end of his shift, feeling guilty about having to deliver the news. Jobs were few and far between for a man of Crenshaw's age and temperament. With each step I took, thoughts about his future consumed my mind. That was the cruelest of ironies. The door of his apartment was unlocked. The chemical-like odour was still strong, but a meaty butcher shop smell was beneath it. I fearfully pushed the door open and found Crenshaw dead. He had been slit open from throat to belly. The expression on his face was a silent shriek of horror. The scene suggested suicide, but the knife in his hand was bloodless. I looked from his body to the apartment wall and saw that the weight of the many layers of paint had caused a wide swath of the wallpaper to peel away, revealing the exposed underside. The jungle pattern on the back was the same as on the front, but its colours were vibrant and fresh. The vibrant greens and blues of the jungle scene appeared to shift before my eyes, revealing new details with each glance. It almost seemed to come alive in the dim room. Gradually, a sound filled my ears, a cacophony of chirping insects blending with distant calls of exotic birds. Rustling leaves hinted at unseen movements of tiny creatures, while occasional snaps of twigs underfoot suggested larger animals prowling nearby. In the background, a rhythmic chorus of croaking frogs added to the symphony, a constant reminder of the teeming life hidden within the dense foliage. Then, small dark eyes peered out from the depths of the jungle scene, causing my stomach to lurch. Vigilant and alert, those eyes were undeniably human. A heartbeat later, the eyes vanished, and the sounds dwindled. This must be shock, I told myself. After one last look at Crenshaw, I turned to leave, leaving the door open, my attention drawn to the payphone at the end of the hallway. A sudden movement caught my eye, freezing me in place. There it was, a crouched shadow darting across the room and out the open window. My rational mind suggested someone had been hiding unnoticed in a corner and fled when my back was turned. Yet deep down, I sensed I was alone in there. Just as I sensed, the small shape had emerged from the wall itself. Now, days later, as I sit alone in my room with a drink in hand, I ponder whether what I witnessed was a horror that Crenshaw had brought home from the war, or if it had always lurked patiently in that room, awaiting the right man burdened with the right damnation within him. Sunlight invaded the thick canopy of trees hanging overhead. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon. My Great Dane Duke had decided that he was going for a walk today, so I had reluctantly pulled on an old t-shirt along with a zip-up hoodie and begrudgingly headed to the thick woods near my house. Most people disliked the woods. They had a slightly deserved bad reputation. After storms, some areas of the ground become almost like jello, not quite solid but not stable enough to hold a person. I had lived in the area long enough to know where the ground would cave out from under you if you stood on it too long. I was careful to keep to the trail, which seemed to greatly annoy Duke, since we normally deviated to go down to the lake. As we walked, I tripped and let go of Duke's leash. He went bolting off into the wood. I swore as I fell on a root that was sticking up through the dirt. I got up and ran after Duke as quickly as I could, calling him again and again. I ran for what seemed like an eternity. A stitch formed in my side, and I put my hand against a tree and breathed heavily. My chest rose and fell rapidly, puffs of air leaving my mouth in clouds of transparent white air. "Duke!" I called as loudly as I could. Crack! I jumped, my heart jolting rapidly. I whipped around, my wrist making painful contact with a tree. Duke's grey fur shined with water. His tail stood on end and he barked, making the leaves shake. "You bad dog," I muttered. His collar was still on and the leash was mostly intact. I grabbed it and looked around, looking for any landmarks of the path. I had run taking turns every now and then, but didn't realise where I was running. Duke barked again and faced the direction he had just come from. I studied the woods, trying to determine if the Duke was trying to get me back to the path, or if he just spotted a squirrel. I didn't realise how tired I was because as I looked into the woods, either my eyes were playing a trick on me, or the shadows were causing some sort of disordered optical illusion. One of the trees in the background of the forest looked as if it was moving, but not the branches, the tree. The tree as a whole looked like it was moving, slowly creeping towards me. I shook my head and looked again, not back where it was originally, but just gone, and so was Duke. I hadn't even noticed he had been barking and growling, and now as I snapped out of whatever odd trance I had been in, he was gone. I cursed again and started calling for him. "Duke! Duke!" My throat hurt and my voice became hoarse. I slumped against a tree, my feet aching. I closed my eyes, the sleep that had peaked at the corners of my eyes, finally forcing them closed. A whimper from somewhere behind me made my eyes fly open and flip around as fast as I could. I stopped. All the feeling in my body turned to cold, numb dread. Duke was suspended 1/2 foot above the ground, a large thorny spike like root going right my sweet dog's chest. I took a shaky step back away from the horrifying scene. I fell backward, my head making painfully contact with the ground. My head swam the distorted trees and looked like they were moving again. My eyes started to water. A voice deep and distorted filled my head. I closed my eyes, trying to get it to stop. I was dreaming. I was back safe in my house. I gasped a burning pain in my back, causing my eye to fly open. A tall, towering monstrosity, its long root-like arms coiled around the trees. Its face was indistinguishable, not smiling nor scowling. I tried to scream, but the sound seemed to cease to exist. Multiple more tentacle root-like arms came out from behind the creature. I felt my eyes slowly closing as I tried desperately to breathe. Why was I so tired? Why were even my thoughts starting to slow and muddle together? Was I dying? What was that piercing pain going through my back and chest? What did that thing want? Where was that incinerate buzzing coming from? Where had that thing come from? I let my eyes close and my breathing slow. Whatever was going through my abdomen had been causing me pain beyond anything I had ever experienced, but now it was finally starting to subside. So was the feeling in my feet and legs. I hadn't noticed it before, but I couldn't feel anything. I was fading, slowly becoming non-existent. I could faintly hear the hard crunch of leaves as the thing slowly lumbered away, off to another forest in another state, in another country. Or maybe not. Maybe it would stay in this forest, luring, scaring and then killing. Was that its purpose? Was that why it was here? To kill? To terrify and then get rid of the evidence so no one could tell of its existence? "But you're not dead," the doctor explained arrogantly. "Your monster didn't kill you." Her quotations of monster was infuriating, and my monster. It wasn't my monster. It wasn't anyone's monster. She made it sound as if it wasn't real. To the rest of the world, it wasn't. It was simply the hallucinations of a crazy woman. A woman who had gone into the woods and stabbed her dog to death. Then laid on the ground for days pretending to be dead, and to cope, she had blamed all on a tree monster. "It's real," I muttered for the 100th time. "You've said that before, but there is no proof of anything in the wood excepted you and your dog." "I would never hurt my Duke!" I screamed, jumping up. The guard standing behind us grabbed me by my arms and shoved me down back on the leather couch. "Miss, please, I need you to stay calm and just talk to me." "You're saying I killed my dog?" My tone spitting malice. "You were found with a knife in your hand." "I'm not crazy, and I didn't kill my dog." "You just told me that you went into the woods. Your dog ran away. It came back. It ran away again. You found it impaled, and then you became impaled too. It doesn't sound the most believable or sane, her condescending tone making her words sharp and harsh. Guards, please take Miss Jaina back to her room. You can't be serious, I promise you, I'm not crazy. The guards grabbed my arms and marched me back to my room. It was more like a cell. Physically, the room was appealing, but emotionless. The walls were stark white. The bed was pushed up to the wall. I stared out the small box window to the long, sprawling green yard. I wasn't crazy. I knew I wasn't. I laid down on the uncomfortable cot. I hummed softly to myself. I closed my eyes and tried to fall asleep. I wasn't crazy. That thing was real, right?